Welcome to today's webinar, Create Beautiful Reports in Essentials. My name is Håkon Kavli. I work at Questback as a digital communications advisor. I work a lot with our user community, as well as with trainings such as these. Today's webinar will look at how you can create beautiful reports in Essentials. We'll start off with how you built your report, curate which questions to use, which question alternatives, how you display your data, etc. So we will look into different chart types and data types. Then building on that, we will look at how you can add filters, be it to drill down on time and add interval filters, or separate and filter your report based on values or which respondents have answered what. The next thing we will look at is how you can add series. And this is where it starts to get interesting, because you can add series with filters and build quite complex analysis right there in Essentials and in your reports. At the latter part, we will look into cross-tabulations as well as collections. I will move into Essentials right now, and let's see. I will also see that I forgot to change my language. I'll put it, set it to English so that you can follow easily. But feel free to ask any question in the chat throughout this session, so that I'm able to reiterate or clarify if there should be any need for that. So the next thing to start everything here, looks like I forgot to save. Apologies for that. We need to do everything in English today. So just like that. Then we should be fine. So my plan today is to start a new quest and fill it with some test data, and then explore all these different topics regarding our reports. So the first thing I'm gonna do, let's see if I can adjust camera right. Okay, so the first thing I will do is to go to and press the Create Quest button. And also you may very well follow me if you happen to be on two screens, or if you have Essentials in front of you. This should be rather easy, at least the first part, to follow and do for yourself. But if watching is enough, you could just sit by and take notes if you feel like it. So the first thing I'm gonna do is to start and create a new quest from a template. We've got some employee experience templates, specifically, let's see, the health and well-being for remote workers. Sort of fits the time right now, when most people are safely at home, hopefully. So I can examine these questions to get to know the questions asked in this template, or I could just press use this template and get going. So just gonna name it Beutiuful reports and get going. So I'm taken to settings, I go through designer, I can see which questions are included, but this webinar isn't really about this building your quest part. We'll focus mostly on reports. But to be able to get any data to play with here in my quests, I would need to generate some test data, or else it will be completely empty until I actually publish it and distribute it to my respondents. So I press generate test data. You see that I get 50 responses, and this will be more or less randomly distributed amongst all the question alternatives. When you create, or the first time you go into a report, it may or may not be complete. This is actually a typical support query that we get, us that have experience with working in reports. Why is my there are missing questions in my report? What can I do? Well, sometimes if you go a lot of rounds between designer, where we create the actual survey and the question set, in the event that you add a question after the first time that you visited reports, it might be that this falls out sort of from your report. So my new question, I put this question as question number 2. I'm prompted with a little message that this will delete my test data, so I might want to go back here and then add it again. Now that I've added a new question 2, there's a gap between question 1.4 and 3. And this is because my report was essentially created before the last question that I've added. And Essentials isn't really a fan of pushing new questions into old reports. And that is why you would need to add your new question manually. And then put it into place if you weren't oriented correctly. So this is one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to just start over, really. So you could really delete the whole report entirely, refresh the page, and then Essentials would generate a new report for you. And this new report will always be complete. So this was more of a little tip for you if you ever find yourself in a position where there are some missing questions in your report, and simultaneously, if you haven't done a lot of work curating the report and adding your series or putting on certain charts and chart settings, it might be easier to just start off completely fresh and then get going with the complete report. So again, let me know in the chat if there's anything you want me to highlight or reiterate on or explain more in detail. or else I would just continue going. So use this report builder here as an opportunity to highlight the information that you find most relevant in your report. In my experience, it's most commonly sort of there's often a gap between who is interested in answering your survey and who is interested in watching and learning from your reports. So to kind of tailor for those that are interested in your results, it might be beneficial to look at how you have asked your questions in your actual survey and how you present them when you're sharing the results. In this case, there's a little header for this question. It says mindset, and then we get a lot of essentially there's questions here, but there's a lot of sayings, and we could see a bar next to it. This question 1 is the main matrix question, and then the 1, 1, 1, 2, and 1, 3 is the sub questions to that matrix. So I can open the 1.1 and see the distribution for this sub question. If using the main question is sufficient, I could in theory just delete the sub questions. Misclicked to press the delete button, and then I would be able to only get sort of a more direct impression of the data in my report. So now that I have a lot of sub questions for each question, it might be easier to just multi-select and get rid of those that I'm not interested in using. So let's see. Also, I'm not interested in my second question that I just put there to demonstrate how you can add more questions to your report. Okay, so as of now, I would have 5 questions in my report. There's a lot of sub-questions to each question, except for question 6, that's an open answer. And now that it's there are only test data here, this open answer wouldn't be that interested in my report. But this might be a good example. Actually, question 6 and question 5. What could we do differently to better support your health and well-being? This is a prime example of sort of a good question text, but not as good of a header if this was a graph, for example. The viewers of my report might be more interested in getting straight to the point, so I could help them by going to the label editor, and instead of using this as my question, I could said that these were all comments from our respondents. And of course, I could reiterate the question text in the additional information. So I can say based on the question, like this. My point here isn't necessarily that you would need to do a lot of manual work, but often is if the question texts are long and or wordy or doesn't necessarily give a precise definition of what a chart or a graph or a table will show, it might be useful to spend a little time on the label editor and sort of pin down what this is about and based on which question. Another thing to keep in mind is that the different chart types and different use of different colors can be used right. You could use your the combination of chart types and colors to sort of highlight the key findings that you want to show, as opposed to if it gets too messy, too much data in the same chart or in the same table, it might be sort of overwhelming and harder for the reader of your report to find out what's actually going on and where they should put their focus. So I encourage you to always play around with these different chart types to see if there are if you are able to sort of manipulate these chart types so that the readability gets increased. That should always be the main focus of your work with reports. Try to make it as comprehensible and as available to the reader as possible. Because keep in mind that a lot of these questions might be common and even self-evident to you. Most of the time, maybe you've created all your questions in your survey from scratch, and you know these questions, but that's often not the case for those that are interested in reviewing and learning from your results. So please keep a good focus on who's reading your report while you work with creating the report. Also, adding colors can make a difference. So now that I use the same color in the whole graph, it wouldn't necessarily be as easy to spot the differences, but it might be a bit easier for the respondent, or I mean, a bit more pleasant if there's a lot of graphs. I would recommend you to keep the colors used at the minimum. The rule of thumb is to use maximum 3 to 4 colors in a graph, because once you start with a lot of series, a lot of different sub questions, and a lot of bars going up back and forth, it gets really messy fast. So this would not this will often affect your report in a negative way when people will struggle with making their and understanding the data that you're showing them. So again, 3 to 4 colors and you should be fine. We also have this gradient colorway, so you could show like a traffic light. You could start showing results closer to 0 in red and results closer to the maximum numerical score as green. Now that I have a lot of mean values here, so these will naturally be close to the middle value and quite yellowish, some more greenish, but as soon as you start with values or percentages and see the distribution, you can see here now that again, the more tables, the more information showing in the graph, the harder to sort of get a fast impression of what am I actually looking at when seeing this graph. What can I get from this? Okay, so I'll revert back to averages, and you can see now that if we dig into the details of this question, my manager really cares about my physical and emotional well-being. On a scale from 1 to 6, I believe, my respondents answered 2.9 on an average. And if I was really interested in digging a bit deeper on this question, I could choose the sub question and then choose to display it in different ways. So we've now looked at how you could build your report. I mean, we will this whole webinar will essentially be about building a report, but we've had a quick glimpse at how you can manipulate it with different chart types and different graphs. So just gonna go quickly back here into my report and I'll show you one little tip, and that is that you can often benefit from having several reports. So I'll name this my main report, and I would later create different sub-reports or other reports that will have other qualities. So it might be useful to add several reports, as said. So you could even add a full report if you want that, and then advise at least adding maybe adding all questions, but at least sub questions from matrices. So like this and like that. So in this full report, I would be able to dig in a bit deeper on looking at the distributions for each question. But it might be, again, too much details to handle that as well. So unless assisted with a couple of clues for the reader, this could be too much details, really. So what I could do is to add each of these questions twice, and then show them both as the distribution and with the corresponding mean values. So I duplicate these questions, place them under each item so that they would show twice. Sorry, wasn't that I meant to do. I meant to duplicate them and placed under each selected item. So looking at the list now, you can see that it goes question 1 1 1 1 1 2 1 2, etc. So every question is repeated twice, just as I asked Essentials to do for me. So in the next steps, I could look at this, how the data is presented. Using the same tip as I gave earlier, keeping so many colors in the same report. So instead of sorry about that, I had some loss of data connection, I think. So what I want to do now is to go to the first question, and then using the display settings, I would change the color so that it shows as either a traffic light, green to yellow, green, yellow, red, or let's see, that would be wrong in this case. I would need red, yellow, green. I could eventually, or alternatively, I could use a single color, but we'll try this for now. Then I apply this to each of the questions, so that I won't need to do and go through the process again. And in the case where I would use a lot of filters, as we would look at later, or if I've used a lot of routing in my quest, and then as a consequence, it might be that the number of respondents per question isn't the same, so that maybe 20 people have answered one question, and then 30 have answered another one, and then it might vary question per question. So in that case, I would like to show the response count as well, so that I get a clue about and an indication for how many people have answered which questions. So I will apply this change to all questions as well. And in the next step, I would go to the second of these questions. And instead of showing the distribution, I would like to show the average value instead. Then I can change the chart type as well. Maybe choose a gauge, so I could see visually how close it is to the maximum value, for example. And then the final sort of modification I would like to do is to take my tip from earlier to change the question or header for this graph. Because as I do that, I'm able to modify this header. Then I can say in the label editor that this graph is about this wasn't really the best of examples, but respondents, sense of expectations. And then I could say that this is the mean. Simultaneously, I could do almost the same here, but this would be the distribution instead. I would need to reiterate this. So it ends up like this. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, Håkon, why are you doing taking so much, struggling so much with the same question? But and why are you even repeating the same questions twice? And the reason for that is if I just maybe and change this to the column instead. Yeah. So now if I go to the report settings and set the layout for my report to one single page and then a 2-column layout, I would be able to access my results rather easily and see the same questions twice and shown in sort of 2 separate ways. But instead of only showing the distribution now, I could also show the mean value. And that sort of adds way more depth to the data that I'm showing to my to my report viewer. So I'm not going to go through the process for each question here, but this is an example for how you can add more depth to your report. This is an example of a live report. So if I wanted to show this to all people interested in my results, I would go and make this report using report settings. I would go and make this report public, and then I could display the time last edited. If people keep revisiting this and I make some amendments, it would make sense for them to get notified or get a little text that shows that now some changes have been made. And then I could add a little password to protect it from the broader public, so that I can be sure that only those that have actively given the password to could be able to reach my report and read the data that is to be found there. So another thing that I wanted to just gonna make a little comparison between this report and if I revisit the full report, I can preview the live report. Now you see that this live report is the default. Sorry, I pressed the wrong one, but my main report. This report is the default view. This will show both the chart and the table for each question, and then you would have the little index section to go through the various questions. Whereas the live report, where I actively choose a one-page layout with the 2-column view, I'm not able to access the table unless I actively add it. There's a question from Robbie in the chat. Do reports update in real time with new responses? Or is there a way to refresh reports to represent new data? You're actually correct in your first part there, Robbie. Live reports, these two that I have right in front of me here, this will refresh with new data every time everyone or someone opens the link. So once this link is like this, I'm going to use this report because it's public. If I go to a session where I'm not logged into Essentials and open my report, of course I forgot to set a password, so I'm not able to do that right away. Let's see. Not gonna password protect it now. So if I go into this report, you can see that there's 50 respondents still, but if someone were to answer in the meantime, there would be 51, 52, 53, etc. And then I could just simply refresh the page every time I wanted essentials to fetch any new data, if it would have come in the meantime. So excellent question, Robbie. Live reports like this, they will update real time when users update it, as opposed to if you export a report and pull a static version of essentials. This will be dead data and only have the responses that were there to begin with once you ordered your report. So I find myself using live reports most of the time, because then I'm, and especially for those quests that I keep open and rolling and essentially never close, I would always use, and I always prefer to use the live report, and even bookmark the links so that I could visit them and check for new responses at my own discretion. So the next up, I would like to run you guys quick through filters. So these are ways to drill down on your data based on certain properties amongst your respondents, what they've answered, what respondent data they have, like which company do they work for, where do they live, what gender do they have, stuff that you know about your respondents, either because they've answered that, or because you know it from prior, from before they started answering. So you could add filters for the stuff that you know. In this case, it will be a value filter, or you could use time to sort of group your respondents based on when they answered, be it today, yesterday, last year, or over the last couple of 3 years, for example. So this will be interval filters. Sadly, I don't have any variation across time in this very report. So it would make sense for me to compare across only today in time. But I do have some different answers that I could create a value filter on. So these value filters can either be grouping respondents based on single conditions, or single conditions across multiple questions, or you can create a multi-condition filter. This would be for a question like, which color do you prefer? I could, using a multi-condition filter, I could group both those respondents that have chosen white as their favorite color, as well as those that have chosen blue. And that way single out and not include those that have answered red or black. So the other way is to create one filter for those that have chosen white, and one filter for those that have chosen blue, and single out everyone else for the white group and everyone else for the blue group. I'm just going to create a single condition filter for now, and I'm in doubt. So now I'm to make it a bit more simple, I'm gonna create 2 multi-condition filters, and I'm gonna base this out of those that feel trusted to work independently and efficiently, and create a group for those that feel high trust in this sense. Highly independent workers. That wasn't maybe. So the question is, I feel trusted to work independently and efficiently. Independent workers with, so let's see, with high trust. And the other group, I would create the same way. If I selected this section, this question alternatives, I could alternatively say those that have not answered 4, 5, or 6 on this question. Low trust. Just to make it a bit easier or readable, I'm just gonna call this group high trust and the other group low trust. So the next step, I could revisit my reports, and for this main report, if I wanted to, just gonna get the colors right. That was the wrong one. Here. So instead of looking at the total, I could essentially go to series and then say that I only want to show respondents that have answered that they have low trust. And simultaneously, I would like to add a series to sort of compare this group head to head with those that have high trust on the first question. And by doing this, I could also apply this comparison to the other questions that allow comparisons, and these are not the open answer questions, unfortunately. But I can compare the two other matrix questions. So now that I added a series here, I could break down the data based on those that have indicated low trust on this question versus those that have indicated high trust. And now it makes sense to show the response count in the chart. And I can see that the difference in numbers between the groups is 21 versus 29. To make this updated in the other questions, I would need to apply this recent changes to the other questions. And I can start looking at my report, how it would look like with when I'm only comparing these two groups. And then I can see, regardless of question 1, 2, I feel trusted to work independently and efficiently. both groups show rather high expectancy, or these are complex questions, but they've answered evenly on the 3.4 question and a bit more differently at question 1.3. And again, this is only test data, so don't read too much into it, but it's often nice to add filters to sort of dig a bit deeper into your data. And are there any differences across certain groups of respondents in my survey? So jumping to question 2, you can see that there's not that much variation here as well. The same for question 3. The only thing that sticks out is those with high trust. They say that their manager is a bit more considerate of their life outside work. Such filters is often the more variation you have in your quest and the more respondents, it often makes more sense to add filters and drill down your results based on properties like what gender they have, where they work, etc. So this is all about digging into your data and getting more insights out of them. So another way to do this could be to add a new report. Say that I take my full report and just duplicate it. And this full report, I could say that it's cross-tabulated on. Sadly, I don't have any gender data here right now. But we could use the same trust variable that we have. And then you can use your imagination to pretend that this is about genders or something. But if I go to series and then add series and add cross-tabulation, I could cross-tabulate based on this question. There's a lot of answer alternatives, so this might get a bit messy. Yeah, so this is way much variation. Not gonna do that. Instead, what I could do is to add 2 series, each per group, on the question based on trust, high trust and low trust. And here you can see when you're comparing, you could add filters as well. So if you have any variation across time, I urge you to try to set on different filters so that you could monitor the change in time. So now that I added the a batch comparison, I would be able to get let's see, I'm just gonna stick with one color here. Oh, not gonna do that. Let's do the spring colorway. So now that I've added this filter, let's see, to all questions, I would be able to see the distribution and answers across each question. Sorry, I picked Norwegian report, but we try again. And now you have the English version. So are there any differences between the high trust and low trust group versus the total? You can see that those that have low trust here are more perceive themselves as more able to manage their time efficiently when working at home or remotely, where those that show high trust answer a little or score this value themselves a little less effective at time management. So this are all examples on depth that you could add using filters. I'm just going to stick to the same example, head back to reports, and show you another nice and neat way of using filters, and that is by adding them for selection to your reports. So you have a little option here called let the viewer choose filters, and by default it's set to no, display report as is. But you could give the live report viewer access to selected filters. Then you can add all the value filters that you feel like showing and feel like your report viewer is actively choosing. So just gonna, for simplicity, add 3 value filters as well. But now I can open this report that I added filters to. I forgot about this little thing, so I'm sorry about that. I meant to do it in the full report, I think. Exactly. So lucky you get a little recap. So what I wanted to do now was to give my report viewers access to using filters themselves. So I'm adding to the 2 value filters that we've created previously, and I'm gonna add some interval filters so that they can actively drill down our results based on these filters if they feel like it. So going to the live report, you now see that this filter icon is showing. This wasn't showing in the past for any of these reports. But in my updated full report here, you can see when it was last updated, it was just now. And I can start filtering either on only one of these questions to see only the high trust group, for example. Then I can switch and add the low trust group instead. Basically the same. Then I can go and apply these filters to all tables. So here going 2 years ago, not getting any results, and it makes sense because this quest was just made earlier today. So I can remove this filter. My point was that this makes sense if you only want to look at new results from this week, this month, etc. And if you happen to have the same question showing twice, you can easily set 2 different time periods head to head. You can even add series for interval filters to get sort of the variation across time dimension in as well. So these value filters are perfect used in combination with live reports so that respondents get what should I say? The viewers of your live report get a better sense of the depth and variation across your data. Did I forget something? Let's see. So yes, finally. Last thing I was supposed to share with you today is the option you have to create collections. And these collections, these are essentially indexes that show data from various questions in the same everything in the same table or in the same graph. So it fetches data across multiple questions and then put it all in the same bucket. To get started with a collection, you simply press the add button and then add collection. And then in the next step, you can add which questions you would like to show in your collection. So in this case, I'm just going to show the 3 main questions. And then you can see if I update the page, I believe, you can see what my respondents have answered on average for each of these questions and on average for the sub questions in this matrix. Just gonna name this main questions. So the same way I could add a new collection for the sub questions. Then I'm not choosing either of these main questions at all. Let's see. I will get a lot of data, I think, in the same. Let's see. This will be. Did I mess up? Yeah. So the table is showing, but it looks like the chart got way too much. It's showing here as the bar, but as you can see now that I have so many sub questions, so many bars, it's too messy for anyone to get a sort of or get any real information out of it, because it's overwhelming, the amount of bars, and you can't really tell what's good or not, because I might be able to tell you that the greener ones are better and more and nicer to have than the red and yellowish ones, but this is a good example for when the table might be better to use. So for the table, you could either add, you can even add more columns, like you could add more statistical properties like the quartiles, the standard deviation, etc. So this might be answer count, answer max. You can see here that the scale is the same for each of these questions, so it's not providing any information to this table. So I'm just going to remove it. But what's cool with these collections, when as soon as you start with tables, is that you can even add colors to them to get sort of a heat map, at least on the average values. So here the greener is highlighted and the yellowish ones are highlighted, reddish, yellowish. And here you would like to get as the greener values, the better. So if I want to show this as in a live report, I can call this the sub questions. And now that I've selected this as default, it will show, the table will show in the live report as opposed to the graph. I keep hitting Norwegian, I'm sorry about that, but we just had our national holiday, so I guess I'm sort of leaning towards our flag now. So trying again, English, and then you can see the collection with the main questions, the averages per question. You can even look at the table, and then here I've selected the table as default, so I would need to actively choose the chart if I feel like examining it. But Robbie asks, can you change the limits of the red, green, yellow scales? Instead of showing 1 to 6, show 1 to 4 or green after a certain number. I think, I mean, the short answer would be no, you can't, but you could, in theory, edit the scales. But you can't actively say that. I mean, if you have a scale 1 to 6 and 4 is positive, you can't actively say that I'm starting the full green on 4, unfortunately. But you could, of course, go in and manipulate, say that you have in designer, if this wouldn't necessarily make sense, but you could change the weight values and say that everything close to 4 is positive. Might be the other way around. No, it's not. But just for the sake of the example, now that I've changed question 1 to give the numerical value of 6 to all answers over 4 or 4 and above, this should affect this, and the green starts showing again. So this is a way that you can actively show green after a certain number, but now you'll see that also the 6 is the median. So everyone scoring, saying 4 gets a 6, everyone saying 5 gets a 6. So this isn't necessarily a good way around. So I think I will revert to saying no, Robbie. You can't change the limits of the red, green, yellow scales. You could potentially create your own reporting theme from the managers and theme manager. I believe that you could get in here and then add your own custom CSS. And in that case, you could, I'm pretty sure that you could say that green is to show in tables starting from 4. but I can't make any promise, unfortunately. But it's worthwhile to checking out this manager and theme manager either way. It's often I see tons of quests each week, and I guess I'm a bit more pickier than others, but I even it makes okay. So what I'm about to say is that the prettier the layout of a quest or a report is, the more pleasant and the easier it will be for the quest respondent or the report viewer to answer or to read your report. So spend some time on creating nice themes, and you might see that your respondents benefit, and maybe your response count will go up in the long run. So paying attention to details is often advisable. So let's see. I think that concludes my agenda for today. I'm just gonna reiterate fast on what we've been through, but we started off creating a quest and filling it with test data just so that we could play with the report settings. We created new reports to get them complete. I added a question just to get an one report with a missing question, and then I went through the process of deleting it and refreshing the page so that I get a new one. I even added one question manually. But my point is that I wanted to show you guys how you could go in to your report builder, actively curate your report to have it show and highlight the data that you find most interesting. And we even spent some time on creating filters and comparisons so that you could actively show the variation in your reports to those that are interested in your data. And I showed you how you can add filters even to your live report so that the viewers of your report could potentially actively enable and toggle on filters themselves. And by doing so, taking a deep dive into your results. Lastly, we had a look at these collections. And the cool thing about collections is that you could group results across multiple questions. And as long as they have the same scale, they will give viewers a good idea about how your respondents have answered across the various questions. Lastly, we also looked at this table and how you can add a lot of questions to the same collection and still get some insights out of it. So if there are any more questions, you can still choose to answer, post them in the chat. Even comment in this question. I will monitor the comments as time flies. And apart from that, I hope that you learned some new cool stuff and found this beneficial. I hope that you subscribe to this our YouTube channel so that you get the newest content first. And I advise you to click into the community, become a member there, so that you could delve into all our other content, be it our user forum when you can ask questions, more trainings, FAQ articles that are illustrated with screenshots and give you in-depth guides and walkthroughs of various and even all functionalities that we keep in Essentials. So that's that from me. Thank you for tuning in, and I see you next time around. Goodbye.